Welcome to the Cincinnati Asian Art Society's April 28th, 2024 program. I'm Helen Rinsberg, President of the Society. Today we have three very distinguished speakers who will share fascinating stories about conservation of East Asian art at the Cincinnati Art Museum. We'll see examples of meticulously restored artworks that can be enjoyed by museum visitors because of the conservation treatments. Our first speaker is Hou-mei Sung, Curator of East Asian Art at the Cincinnati Art Museum. Dr. Sung received her BA in Foreign Languages and Literature and an MA in Chinese History, both from the National Taiwan University. She also earned a PhD in Museum Studies from the Case Western Reserve University. Prior to coming to Cincinnati, Dr. Sung served as Research Associate at the Cleveland Museum of Art and a variety of research and teaching positions in museums and academic fields in Asia and throughout the United States, including the National Palace Museum in Taipei, Taiwan, John Carroll University, Case Western University, and Cleveland State University. She also worked as the Executive Officer of the Chinese American Faculty and Staff Association and Program Director of the Chinese Arts and Cultural Celebration at Cleveland State University. Her research on the Ming Court painting received a Fulbright Scholarship in 2000. Dr. Sung has curated such popular exhibits as Dress to Kill, Japanese Arms and Armor, and Masterpieces of Japanese Art. She has over 50 publications, including Decoded Messages, the Symbolic Language of Chinese Animal Paintings, Terracotta Army, Legacy of the First Emperor of China, Galloping Through Dynasties, and now about to open on May the 10th, From Shanghai to Ohio. She's also an incredible, I call her my international art detective, because she has found more treasures in the basement and storage rooms and found out some really interesting things. It's fun to have dinner with her because you always get, you won't believe what I found this time. So for that, I'll turn it over to Hou-mei.
Today, I will give a brief introduction of the East Asian Department's conservation. And I first came to this museum in 2002, when the museum started to establish the first independent Asian department, Asian art department. Before that, the Asian is together with antiquity, Islamic, a whole bunch of departments. So since 2002, when I first arrived here, I realized that there are so many artworks that has been really not fully cataloged, or some of them not even accessioned. And the other thing I found is there are many Chinese and Japanese paintings in the storage that has never been not only fully researched, organized, they were not restored, they were in terrible condition. So, and also the museum does not have a fund designated to restore Asian artworks. They do have funds or department or people resource for Western art, but not Asian. So, and the Asian art conservation, as you will hear from the two conservators, is really sometimes involve different techniques and disciplines. And so the first group I'm going to introduce is a real new you can call it a real new discovery. Okay. I call them alphabetic scrolls. When I came here, they were called alphabetic scrolls because they are scroll A, B, C, D, E, F, G, from A to U. They came, when I asked the registrar where they come from, they said this is beyond our time. They came early. Nobody knows where it come, who donated, where they come from. And they are not really, nobody tried to identify the artist because they came so early. You have to understand many of our artwork came in like late 19th century when the museum has no staff who can read Asian languages. If you cannot identify the artist, you cannot sort of accession them. So it's really understandable. It's very difficult. But when I found these alphabetic scrolls A to U, and I researched and I realized they are so important. Many of them are so rare, and the artists almost have no other works in the world. So after I did this, I immediately wanted the registration department to accession them. But if you don't have information, you don't know if they were long. They could be long, according to them. So I still cannot accession them. I could not do that until not only I identified them, until I found the provenance. So that is really difficult because normally if you have like mystery works, you can put on the newspaper and say people may claim them. But you cannot put on the newspaper scroll A, scroll B. We don't have the artist's name. We don't know when it come in, right? So I just have to go through all the archives and all the directors, all the correspondence, which is in hand cursive writing, try to read all of them, the donor cards, they are in index card, that's before computer. So finally, I did identify. I found out they all came to the museum as an estate of the American painter Robert Bloom. That's the picture of him. So you see his dates. When he died, his estate, from his estate, a group of paintings were given to us because he went to Japan in 1890. From 1890 to 1892 as an illustrator of the Scribner magazine introducing Japanese art. So while he was in Japan, he collected Japanese prints, paintings, no masks. He's particularly interested in no masks. So he gave us quite a few artworks, but the painting part, probably due to the difficulty to accession without people cannot read the signature or the inscription and the date. So the paintings were listed as unlocated or missing. So I was very lucky because when I found this information, there were total of 17 paintings missing and matched with the 17 I found. So I can prove the provenance. Then finally, the registration agreed to let me accession them. And I will just, and you can imagine these paintings have been in the museum, so they are the earliest that entered the museum in the late 19th century. So they were in terrible condition. And so I realized the first need is to restore them. And I worked with Cecile, who will tell you more detail about some of them, maybe. And then basically, we got a grant from the Carpenter Foundation and a matching grant from the IMLS. But anyway, this is 2006. And so I want to show you some of them. Okay, this is one of them. This is the old, you can see it says old scroll A. Then when it's accessioned, it's 1906 when they accessioned the year they came to the museum. But now we can give them a number, an ID. So, and this is a very nice painting by Tosa Mizuoki, and depicting Mount Fuji, and the dated painting of this dated to 1684. And then I'll show you one more example. Now this is before and after. Can you see that? Before and after. See, now you know how important it is to restore a painting before it deteriorates and disappear. And then next, we have this, it's a scroll L. Scroll L is a pair of the depicting the cranes in spring and autumn. And it's beautiful, you can see. But you can see on the border of the mounting part already broken off. See how terrible shape it is. And some of them cracked and lost. And then you see the restored image before and after. The second one, before and after. And then one more example from the, maybe 1, 2. This is the beautiful painting. See, the crack totally disappeared. And look at this painting. This is Scroll M. Scroll M is by Sasayama Yoi, and depicting an actor with a black mask. Sasayama Yoi is a Kano school painter, but his painting is very rare because he's mostly doing prints. And you can see this is a ritual dance, an actor holding a string of bells and depicting a no drama, the kyogen, the sort of a brief comic interlude before the no performance, small. But you can see this painting, you can see the stiff cracking and creases. But look at this one. It's also before and after. See, it's really dramatic. So Asian conservation is really a highly tedious work, but a very interesting, very important skill. And then finally, scroll Q. Look at this condition. This is when I found them. And then, again, this one, scroll Q is by Hasegawa Setan, and depicting the god of wind. His painting, again, is very rare. I haven't found another painting by him, only other prints or something. See, this is after. So now just give you some idea of how this kind of things is so important to paint Asian paintings. And then the next help I got is from the Dunlop Foundation. In 2002, the Dunlop family donated 14 paintings to our Asian art department. All the paintings from the family attic, I think, when they brought in Cecile and me, were trying to open, and our hands covered with black mold. Cecile immediately have to isolate all of them from each other. But that is the condition, because people sometimes, if no one really take care of them. But that after we received the Dunlop donation, we talked to the family, say, there's no way we can display all these paintings unless you give us some funds to restore them. So Mrs. Dunlop did give us funds to restore the paintings donated. So we did that a few years. And after Mrs. Dunlop passed away, they established a Dunlop Family Foundation. And then since then, we have been receiving the Family Foundation. We apply every year, and we use those funds to restore our paintings. That's why I'm very grateful to the Dunlop Foundation. I want to show you a few. That's paintings from the Dunlop. This is from the Dunlop family collection and restored with the Dunlop family funds. A Japanese painting by Katsuta Tetsu. And next, Japanese Beauty. Next, this is after. See the before and after. And then the next one is the most important painting. This painting depicting the Japanese goddess Amaterasu, it turned out to be a real important work. And I did write a paper on this artist and published in the orientations. So I'm not going to go elaborate. But this is also from the painting from Dunlop Family Collection and restored with the funds. this painting was restored with the Dunlop Family Foundation later. And this painting is a Chinese portrait of a court lady of the Qing dynasty. Again, this is a very important painting. It's a very large painting too. So originally, you can see it's in a frame, which caused difficulties when we want to display. But we remounted it into a hanging scroll so we can display it more easily, and it's the traditional form. The Dunlop funds also helped us restore quite a few paintings that will be displayed in my next exhibition from Shanghai to Ohio by Wu Zhongxiong, this artist. So we are very grateful to this foundation. They restored quite a few works. I think it's about 30-some works total throughout. Okay, now I want to thank all of you, the Cincinnati Asian Art Society. This screen was restored in 2013 by the Cincinnati Asian Art Society members' donation. And at that time, this painting was called A Presentation of a Prince. It's illustrating the Tale of Genji, first chapter. And the whole screen was attributed to one of the very few female artists of the 17th century, Chiyo Mizuhisa, which is extremely rare. And the painting was collected in Japan through the recommendation of Ernest Fenollosa. You probably know he is a very important figure to introduce an American scholar went to Japan, and the first scholar who introduced Japanese art in the U.S. Later, he became the director of the Museum of Fine Art in Boston. But anyway, I realized the painting was very important. So when I went to Japan, I always go to their, they have a Tokyo National Institute for cultural property. So I alerted them, and I showed this screen pictures to their expert, and they immediately recognized this is really important. So they informed us they will restore for us for free in the National Institute of Cultural Properties. But in order to bring this screen to Japan, the shipping, the shipping cost, the courier, whatever, it is still beyond our museum. We don't have funds for Asian art. So with the Asian Art Society members' donation, we covered that cost. Once it's in Japan, we got covered. But before we reach there, we still need to raise funds. So this painting is really, let me give you a little background. Chiyo Mizuhisa is a female artist. If today you check who is Chiyo, you may find that he was just an illustrator of the Tale of Genji books. But actually, his father is Tosa Mizunobu, and her husband is Kano Motonobu. In other words, her father was the Tosa school founder, and her husband was the leading master of Kano school. In Japan, the two leading painting schools, the Kano and Tosa, dominated the Shogun court after the 17th, 18th century. So you can see her son is also become a leading Kano school painter. So you can see that she was sort of overshadowed by her husband and her son and her husband. The whole family are great painters. But look at this painting, you can see how much she has accomplished. She's really overlooked, but today there's no large works by Chio, and now we have this rare screen. Cincinnati Asian Art Society also helped us. This is the before. You cannot see the damage from this large picture, so I want to show you some details. Oh, sorry, I better. Okay, you see the crack now? You see why it needs restoration. Okay, and then this is after. It's beautiful. And when I went to Japan to do a consultation with those conservation lab, these are the group of people who helped to restore. So that's you see each panel separately examined and studied. And this painting is in the process of being restored by the recent funds donated by, again, Asian Art Society. So I cannot wait for this Kishi Ranzan painting to be restored. This is another important painting you can see depicting a hawk with the sakura, Japanese favorite national flower. So we'll not go, when it's restored, maybe I'll talk about it more. And finally, I want to bring one painting to show you one painting which is my candidate for the next conservation project if we get the funds. And this painting is clearly identified as by Megata Morimichi and dated to 1875. The reason this painting has never been able to display it because it was put in a frame and stored with the Western oil paintings in the storage. So Cecile and me looked at that recently, and we decided we want to restore this and hopefully mount it again as a large hanging scroll and put it in our gallery. So that's all for me, and you will hear all the marvelous miracles of restoration from the other two curator conservators. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Kelly Rectenwald, Associate Object Conservator. She joined the Cincinnati Art Museum in 2014. In her role, she cares for all three-dimensional works of art in the collection. Her treatments cover a wide range of materials from ancient ceramics and structures to decorative wood and lacquer to contemporary art. During her time in Cincinnati, Kelly has treated objects in several major permanent gallery installations, including the Ancient Middle East in 2020, Antiquities in 2015, African Art in 2016, Islamic Ceramics in 2021, and South Asian Art in 2023. Now, the other thing is I'm going to add here that she didn't, is she's part of a team that does these. And I know the Ancient Middle Eastern Gallery were 20 people that were part of that reinstallation. And so that's always a challenge. The more people you get involved with the project, the more you have to deal with. And anybody that's been through the South Asian galleries knows how incredible it is. Kelly has over 10 years of experience in the field of conservation and has held the designation of Professional Associate from the American Institute of Conservation since 2017. She holds a BA in Anthropology and Chemistry from Olivet College and an MA in Master of Science in Objects Conservation from the Institute of Archaeology, University College London. Outside of work, she enjoys making ceramics and gardening. Please welcome Kelly.
All right, so I'm going to talk to you today about this Tang Dynasty horse, and this is a ceramic horse in our collection that was donated in 1997, and we ended up removing a tassel from its forehead. So I'm going to talk about the process that led to us making that decision. A lot of times conservation, you see the before and after photos. This one isn't a really fun before and after photo, but this is going to show you all of the behind the scenes background research that went into this treatment that with my hands was actually not that hands-on, but in terms of the study that went behind it was very time-consuming. This piece was brought to the lab in preparation for the Galloping Through Dynasties exhibition in 2021-2022. And Hou-mei was concerned about the tassel on the forehead of the horse. She noticed it wasn't consistent with similar objects, and this is where we began our investigation. We were looking to establish whether the tassel could be a later addition to the piece, and from my experience with archaeological objects, I knew that this was definitely a possibility, and it wouldn't be uncommon for us to see that. So, the condition history. To start, I looked at all of the information that we had on file for this object. And as with many objects of this age and archaeological context, it's clear that it has a very complex history of damage and repair. And I want to start by saying that for an archaeological object of this age, and in comparison with similar Tang Dynasty horses in other collections, we would expect that ours would have had damage that would have been repaired post-excavation, probably fairly soon after it was excavated, and prior to the first time it was sold. However, the records that we have, they weren't normally made at that time. Conservation wasn't a real field at that time, so we don't have records from that, which is fairly normal, but we don't have anything to tell us those details of repair. So right away, I already knew that we would need more than our written records to understand the condition of this object. In the files, we do have documentation that showed that Oxford University conducted thermoluminescence on samples, and it did date to the Tang Dynasty. So we have an authentic date for it, which is really great to have. We also have a record of where that sample was taken from, and it is consistent with a drill hole on the object at the edge of the inner cavity. So this tells us that at least in that one location where that sample was drilled, there is original material there without any significant alteration to the object. And we also had notes indicating that prior to the museum acquiring the object in 1997, that it fell off a table and was broken. We don't have any other details or photos of that damage that occurred, but we can suspect that it was probably fairly significant. It's very rare, in my experience, that a ceramic piece will fall off a table and not have some severe breaking. We do have records and photos, though, of a treatment that was done in CAM in 2007. So that was 10 years after it was donated. So we have evidence of the old damage. These are photos from that treatment from 2007. The conservator notes the presence of extensive overpaint and fill material covering the original surface in many areas. So the focus of that treatment was on reducing that old fill material to uncover more of the original surface. And due to the constraints of the treatment, she focused on just the mane and the saddle at that time in 2007. And you can see in these photos we have from that treatment, the white areas are the fill material. And the conservator has reduced them to uncover some of the mane and the saddle. And this treatment revealed that there is significant alteration from past repairs, and that they cover up some of the original surface in many areas. So these are also photos from that 2007 treatment that we have. The conservator used UV light to analyze the surface and noted the presence of yellow fluorescing adhesive scattered around the surface, including around the tassels. In these slightly blurry photos from that treatment, you can see some of that fluorescence. So we can clearly see with UV light that all of the tassels have been attached with a modern adhesive. Whether they just fell off at some point and were reattached, or if they are later additions, we can't say from this, but it's another clue, another piece of evidence that helps us understand that they have been altered at some point prior to this 2007 treatment. And we know prior to it coming to the museum, because if it had been treated in the museum, we would expect there to be records of that. So we'll talk about the visual evidence that I could gather. So just from visually examining the object, I could see the presence of several different adhesives: a reddish natural resin adhesive, a hazy yellow animal glue adhesive, and a modern translucent adhesive that has yellowed with age. Due to the time frame for use of those three different adhesives, I can say that they were likely used in 3 separate treatments. So right there, just from a visual analysis, I can say this object has probably gone through 3 different rounds of treatments, 4 treatments if you count the 2007 treatment. And I can see the presence of old overpaint on the legs, the tassel, the mane, the tail, pretty much scattered all around the object. I can also see heavy sanding marks over most of the surface of the object, which you can see in some of these close-up photos around the tassels, those big sanding marks. You can also see in these photos where some of the tassels have a distinct join line that doesn't exactly match the surface where they're attached to, especially on the photo of the head tassel and in the photo that's above it. Some of the other tassels, like the other two photos here, I can see that there is film material and overpaint where it connects at that seam with the body. I can also see that we have three distinct versions of tassels. We have a very pointy tassel with a design on the upper area, and we have a rounded teardrop shape with the same design on the top, and then we have a less defined tassel that has no design on it at all. And again, lots of overpainting on these surface attachments and sanding marks. We know for sure that most, if not all, the tassels were detached from the body of the horse at some point, but we can't say for sure still whether or not they're original and they've been fabricated, or if they just fell off at some point in burial and were put back on. So next, we did have some x-rays that were taken in 2007 as part of that treatment, but they were just on really small areas and they were on film slides. They weren't great resolution. The contrast wasn't very good on them, but we could see some evidence of dowels and things that would hint at significant alteration. So we had that valuable information. But we had these digital x-rays done in 2022, and we were able to splice together an image that's the entire horse. So now we can see very clearly the extent of the damage to the piece. And it is extensive. We can see lots of different materials that have been used as dowels. We see nails, metal bars, metal plates. We also see many breaks in the legs and tail and the platform that it stands on. The mane, the head, also just really all over. There's a lot of breaks here. So the extent of repair has been significant. We can be completely sure of that now. And here are just some close-up details where you can really see where those joins and the fragmentation is. Because most of the repairs are not visible on the surface of the object, especially in the legs. We know that at least some of the surface, probably a good portion of the surface, has been refinished to hide this damage. And I want to mention that this is not consistent with modern conservation ethics or practices. We do not refinish original surfaces or cover up original surfaces. So I know that these repairs are probably quite old and were carried out by someone who was not a conservator. So the next step, because we still don't have anything conclusive about the tassels at this point, but we decided to work with UC and the Institute of Heritage Science. UC actually connected us to the Institute of Heritage Science there in Italy. Pietro Strobia from the Department of Chemistry, and Claudia Conti at the Institute of Heritage Science in Italy. And we provided them with samples that they did several different types of tests on to analyze the mineralogical characterization and identify organic and inorganic compounds. And all of this was to find out what each of the tassels was made of. We also sampled from the area where the luminescence test was taken, where we knew we had this unaltered material, so we could do a comparative analysis between the tassels and this area. So even if we learned nothing about from these other tests, we would at least have a comparative analysis to do, so we could compare the samples from all of the tassels to that original sample that we have, that we know what it is. So the sampling, I drilled 11 samples total, one from each of the tassels and one from the inner cavity where the TL test was taken. And you can see they're very small holes, but they were drilled 5 millimeters deep so that we could obtain a bigger sample area and get a good sample of the inner tassel. So these were considered very minimal in terms of sample size and invasiveness to the object. We gathered a lot of information, so I'll summarize what we found. Samples, all the samples are numbered there where they were taken from. So samples 5, 8, and 10, 10 being the tassel on the head, were not ceramic. but were instead made of different conservation fill materials. Additionally, we found that though the other tassels were made of a similar ceramic material, they had not been fired to the same temperature as the sample that came from the body. So, all of this data presented a possibility that none of these tassels are original to the sculpture. There is a possibility that they could have been added at some point in the past. Now, this is the reason it is so important for conservators to keep records of why they did a treatment. In every treatment that we make, it's a lot of paperwork of why we decided to take the course of action that we took. So maybe there was a reason that these were added that's just not clear to us right now. That's the positive, optimistic opinion, right? It's not meant to deceive. It was there was a reason. But in the end, and with all of this evidence that we had gathered, and with Hou-mei's curatorial expertise, we decided to remove the tassel on the head, knowing that it was not ceramic material, it was in fact a replacement, it's not very well attached to the head as well. So it was adhered with an old animal glue, and it easily detached with a little bit of heat. I think it probably took me 5 minutes in total to remove the tassel from the horse. Once it was off, it was very clear that there was no original point of attachment. Normally, when an attachment like this is added to clay, there would be scoring on the body, or we would see markings from where the piece had become detached or broken off in the past. But the surface was completely smooth underneath with absolutely no sign of attachments. So it's very likely that there was never a tassel here. This tassel has, of course, been saved so that in the future it can be studied further or even reattached if that's found to be appropriate. Hou-mei shaking her head, no, with further testing. The other tassels currently remain on the object, and this is due to many factors. The constraints of this treatment, both in time to prepare it for display, meant that we could not address all of the tassels at this time. The tassels are also consistent with other similar sculptures, and there is still a possibility that they are part of this sculpture, though I think the case for it is very low at this point, since they were not fired to the same temperature. All of the data collected from the sampling has been published and saved in the collection files for future study and analysis, and for treatment when that becomes possible. And then I have just our paper, because I borrowed a lot of photos from our paper.
Our next speaker is Cecile Mear, conservator of works on paper at the Cincinnati Art Museum, where she has worked since 1993. She received her Museum Master of Arts and Certificate of Advanced Training from Buffalo State College, specializing in paper conservation. Prior to coming to Cincinnati, Cecile worked at the Balboa Art Conservation Center in San Diego, the Intermuseum Conservation Association in Oberlin, and at Perry Houston and Associates in Fort Worth. She is a peer and peer-reviewed professional member and fellow of the American Institute for Conservation. Cecile has extensive experience working with European Old Master prints, 19th and 20th century American and European prints and drawings, Indian and Islamic paintings, and portrait miniatures. Since joining the Cincinnati Art Museum, she has been fortunate to work with curators and collectors from whom she has learned to appreciate the world of Asian painting and prints. Cecile.
Good afternoon. So those of you who are longtime members of the Cincinnati Asian Art Society may recall presentations where Hou-mei and I shared news of our fundraising and conservation efforts. Since my last talk in 2015, we've made steady progress working with specialist conservators to clean, repair, and remount paintings in the museum's collection. Some of the paintings are new acquisitions, and others have been in the museum for more than a century. Paintings were remounted sporadically in the second half of the 20th century, but funding was unavailable from the early 1990s until Hou-mei arrived in 2000, and I have 2003, she said 2002. And she began aggressive efforts to seek outside funds to save the Chinese and Japanese paintings from languishing in storage. And now we can add Korean paintings to that list as well. In this picture, Conservator Jing Gao is in the conservation lab at the University of Michigan Museum of Art, the lab that he has established. And behind him you can see a painting of lotus blossoms. The lotus blossoms was one of several paintings from the museum's collection that Jing restored for us. And on the right is a recent photograph of the hanging scroll showing the completed remounting. Our first successful grant from the E. Rhodes and Leona B. Carpenter Foundation for $30,000 in 2006, combined with a federal grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services and a gift from the Asian Art Society, allowed us to bring conservators into the museum to do a comprehensive condition survey of all the Asian paintings and textiles. The specialist conservators were able to give us recommendations for treatment, proper storage, and display. The Carpenter Foundation money also paid for the first series of conservation treatment of our top priority paintings. Since then, we've received generous support from the Jean Ann Gray Dunlap Foundation, the Stockman Family Foundation Trust, and continued support from you, the Cincinnati Asian Art Society. Because of our successful fundraising, you can now see paintings that had never been on view because of their fragile condition. We make decisions to send the paintings out for conservation based on both condition and on their significance as revealed by Hou-mei's research. Some paintings were initially a low priority for treatment, but after Hou-mei discovered information about the artist or subject matter that had been previously unrecorded, they came up to the top for priority. Here are two of the paintings collected by Robert Blum that had been in the museum's collection since 1906 but had never been exhibited. Ko-wei Wong and Hou-mei are on the left examining the Mount Fuji and discussing the treatment before starting the work. And Ryo Nishiumi is in the process of attaching new backing paper to an actor with a black mask on the right. Most of the conservation work on the Asian paintings is done by contract conservators who are trained in scroll mounting, and that's a specialty that's very rare in the United States. The conservators we use have been trained in China and Japan. My part in the conservation focuses on identifying condition problems, writing grant proposals, communicating with the conservators, and I also pack the paintings, help the museum registrars, coordinate shipping, I make storage boxes, and I keep track of expenses related to the projects. A recent project, which Hou-mei mentioned, is the conservation of a group of paintings that will be installed beginning tomorrow in Hou-mei's exhibit From Shanghai to Ohio, Wu Chongyang, 1898 to 1989. And this is just a small selection of Wu's paintings that were chosen for conservation. All but a handful of his paintings on paper were mounted to laminated paper panels that are just slightly larger than the paintings themselves. In this detail of the painting of sparrows, if you look closely along the left, you can see the edge of the paper mount, and I'm not sure if it's visible, but you may be able to see small brown foxing stains across the sheet of paper. To prepare the paintings for exhibit, Hou-mei wanted to mount them as hanging scrolls, and the treatments would also address the stains and general discoloration of the papers. We began fundraising for this project in 2018 and arranged to have the first group of paintings treated at the Asian Painting Conservation Lab at the University of Michigan Museum of Art. They had recently hired a conservator from China, Qian He, whose initial training was at the Palace Museum in Beijing. Hou-mei and I took 21 paintings to Ann Arbor in the winter of 2018, and later 2 more groups of Wu paintings were sent to Ko-wei Wong in New York and Jing Gao in Massachusetts. If you visit the exhibit, you will also see paintings from the Frank Museum of Art at Otterbein University in Westerville, Ohio. The curator at the Frank Museum hired the Chinese painting conservator at the Cleveland Museum of Art to treat their paintings. So putting this exhibit together took 5 years and 4 specialist conservators to complete. The conservation work on our paintings was funded by the Dunlap Foundation and the Stockman Foundation. We don't yet have photographs of the paintings after mounting, but you can see them in the exhibit beginning May 10th. And then on May 19th, Hou-mei will be presenting a program about the artist and the exhibit here at the Taft. Another piece remounted recently is Guan Yu on horseback. This treatment was also carried out by Chen at the University of Michigan and was supported by a grant from the Dunlap Foundation. And this is a rubbing, not a painting, and it kind of looks like a woodcut, but it is a rubbing. Guan Yu was exhibited in Galloping Through Dynasties, 2022 to 2023. When the museum acquired the piece, it was framed, sandwiched between glass and cardboard, with remnants of the silk borders from a hanging scroll mount. The details of the front and back are intended to show how the paper was distorted when it was pressed into the recesses of a stone relief carving when the rubbing was created. But those distortions are so subtle that you can really only see them on very close inspection. What you can see are creases and air pockets between the backing paper and the rubbing, and how the low-quality backing paper is stained. Light penetrated the rubbing where ink is absent, causing the backing paper to darken, and it's most evident in the circular form, which I cannot see from here, but perhaps you can see it. Chen removed the backing papers, washed the rubbing, and constructed a simple Chinese-style hanging scroll mount. And the picture on the right shows the newly mounted rubbing in the Schiff Gallery during Galloping Through Dynasties. Guan Yu is not the only object we have acquired that was cut down so it could be framed. This stunning portrait of a court lady, a Qing dynasty painting on silk, came to the museum in a giltwood frame with no protective glazing and a solid wood backboard, and it was tacked along the edges to a wood strainer. Fortunately, between the painting and the wood was a piece of muslin. I was able to remove the tacks and lift the painting on its muslin backing board from the strainer, and then I packed it between boards to keep it flat when we shipped it to Kauai for treatment. She removed the muslin and the original backing papers, washed the painting, and mounted it with these blue and white silk borders, which looks very, very impressive. So this 18th century flower and bird painting by Li Bingdo was also in a frame. A gallery label on the back indicates that the painting was framed in Cincinnati, and I suspect that this Cincinnati gallery also trimmed the scroll mount so the painting could be framed. This painting is currently undergoing conservation treatment by Kauai. These pictures show the painting being washed on a table by pouring water over it and gently brushing the surface with soft brushes. On the left, in the upper part of the picture, the container holds the clean water that's being used to wash the painting, and on the right, the water is very brown after the solubilized discoloration has been removed from the silk. After washing, Kauai placed the painting face down to remove the backing papers. The painting is still wet as she peels the paper away from the silk. Here, the painting, still face down, has new backing papers to which Kauai is brushing a very dilute solution of an animal glue. And on the right is the painting mounted to a drying panel where it will remain for several months. And this long drying under tension is what helps keep the scrolls from distorting after the mounting has been completed. And the final painting I will show is Female Immortal with Crane, which had also been in a frame. When we examined it during our 2008 condition survey, we thought it had been glued to masonite. We predicted that it would be too risky to remove it from the dense board. Splits in the silk were evidence that the painting was already weak when it was mounted, and treatment would only cause further damage. Hou-mei wanted to show it in her exhibit Realm of Immortals in 2013, so I unframed it and did a more thorough examination. What we thought was masonite was actually a dense, thick cardboard, and tests that I did determined that the adhesive was water-soluble. It looked like treatment might be possible, but we were not able to proceed before the exhibit. So to prepare it for display, I cleaned the glass, added spacers to separate the glass from the painting, and reframed it. Last month, we delivered the painting to Chien in Ann Arbor. I explained to him that we had been advised that mount removal could damage the painting, and asked that if he found that to be the case, we would accept his assessment. The following week, Chien let us know that he felt the painting could be lifted from the cardboard using thin nylon fishing line. He also predicted that even with washing, the radiating lines of grime would remain. Chien should complete the treatment next year with the painting returned to a hanging scroll format as originally intended. The museum still has paintings in need of treatment before they can be presented to the public, but we feel confident that we can continue the progress of the past 25 years to improve the condition of our Asian paintings and bring attention to this important collection. Thank you.
Okay. So who has the first question, and who do you want to ask it of? Mike.
So how much of the painting materials that we're talking about in the group in general are water soluble?
So,
So the question is, how many of the paintings have water-soluble paint?
so they were
Paint or glue?
Which one? Paint? Paint.
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 Okay.
So the media are when applied, they're water-based. However, over the centuries, the paint becomes less and less water-soluble. And so, I mean, I find it kind of shocking to see how much water is involved in the treatment. But one of the steps in the treatment, if it appears that any of the paints are friable, meaning they might crumble off during treatment, or possibly become soluble during the wet treatment, they are then consolidated with animal glue ahead of time. So the conservator will test all the different colors and make sure that they're stable before doing any washing or remounting.
This is why she has a degree in chemistry.
No, that's Kelly.
That's Kelly. Okay. Yeah. Yulene.
Yeah, I just want to say we are so fortunate to have you all taking care of our collection in our museum. So I think that's our fortune. Cincinnati's fortune. Cincinnati Art Museum's fortune.
Thank you.
And especially Hou-mei. Hou-mei, she's a very respected scholar in Asian art, and we were so fortunate to have her in Cincinnati and discover so many important treasures for us. So
Thank you.
so thank you.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just going to repeat that one just a minute, Stuart, because I want to make sure it is picked up on the microphone, that this is an incredible team that we have at the Art Museum that works together. And the research that Hou-mei has done is absolutely incredible, and she didn't even go into all of the things that she has been able to discover. Even that last painting, the immortal with the crane, was just lady with a crane until she came along and was able to put the pieces together and the symbols together to understand that this was now a Taoist painting. It wasn't just a pretty painting. So it had a whole nother layer of meaning to it by having that kind of identification to go with it. It's also fun as a docent to tour them when you have stories like this, because it really, people get really excited about it, Okay, Stuart, you had a question.
Yeah, I was wondering, scrolls are rolled up and they're put in special boxes for storage, but one can see what happens to the damage, a lot of it because of the way it's rolled, I suppose. So my question is, once you restore them, is it still rolled back up and put in a box? Or would there be a better way to store it more flat so it wouldn't succumb to all the damages?
Okay, so the question in essence is the rolling of the scrolls for storage seems to affect the painting. Once it is restored, is it going to get rolled again if that has been the problem?
Okay, so the answer is yes. Most often the paintings are re-rolled, but if the scroll mounter feels that the painting support is still fragile, even with the new, stronger, flexible backing papers, they'll roll them on a larger diameter tube. Traditionally, they're rolled on a futamaki, which is a wood support, specially made to fit each individual painting. But these days, because of the cost and having to go to Japan to have that type of support made, we're now using acid-free cardboard tubes that are cut and modified so that the bottom roller of the scroll it's sort of like a clamp that goes over the bottom roller, and then it's rolled up that way, and then the larger diameter helps reduce the amount of strain on the scroll. Occasionally, if the support is really, really weak, the mounter will recommend that they be stored flat, which is something we don't really have. We're not really able to accommodate that at the museum, but ideally, on occasion, some of the really special, old, fragile paintings would be kept flat for storage.
Actually, in the ancient time, rolling up a scroll actually is the best way to preserve it at that time, because it's not exposed to the pollution, everything. That's why in ancient time in Japan and China, they call air the painting in autumn when the air is dry and clean. So they took it out so it wouldn't get mold. But in terms of saving the space, not exposing to light, that really is the best way to preserve, to store a Chinese painting. And I think the damage costs more when you hang it, because the weight dragging down, and also the exposure to dust, to everything. The only thing that can invade the rolled up one is the bugs, that worms.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
But
yeah, and so traditionally the paintings would be stored in wooden boxes that have insects don't like.
Right.
So not only does it
Special.
seal them up,
Like cedar or something?
yes, something with that kind of.
paolonia, or
Paolonia.
we
Yeah.
have some that look to me like mahogany or cherry. Well, they look like cherry, but I'm not sure. We only have a couple of boxes like that. But so yeah, the insects wouldn't be able to get into the boxes to damage the paintings.
Just jumping on actually those two questions, I noticed that a lot of the before pictures of the scrolls show kind of scalloping, where there's damaged, undamaged area, another damaged area that's in parallel to whatever the scroll has been rolled on. And I'm wondering wondering, is that because perhaps the scroll has been rolled and then left as is for long periods of time, rather than being taken out and aired? Where I'm kind of wondering, if you have a scroll like that, would it be a good idea to periodically just roll it a little bit so that it doesn't sit in one position? Sorry for the long question.
Which I need to repeat. Okay.
His voice carries.
We have good microphones, but not that good, Becky. So the question is, he had noticed that there was sort of scalloping, where it seems that there were places where the painting was not affected, and then there were cracks, and then others out by that. So would it be helpful for anyone here that has a scroll to occasionally turn them if you're not going to hang them out and air them in the fall like Asians do?
I would say no.
Yeah, I would say no.
Okay.
So when you roll a scroll, it should be, the tension should be not too loose, because you don't want it moving around and the surface being abraded, and you don't want it to be too tight. But I think just trying to like loosen it and then tighten it, I don't really see how that would
I think there is a skill
reduce.
in how
I
you
didn't
roll
mean
it.
to loosen and tighten, I meant just to pick it up as is and turn it. If
Oh,
it-
so
if
it's
it were
resting on a
loose-
different
if it were
spot.
loose instead of being circular, it would tend to do this.
I see what you mean.
Does that make sense?
The traditional scroll boxes usually have a little,
Stand, right?
yeah, so the end knobs would rest on these little protrusions at either end of the box, which takes the weight off of the bottom of the scroll. So if they're, and I don't think just resting on the bottom is what causes that. It's I'm not sure I can clearly explain what's happening.
Yeah,
That's
I-
okay.
I
I
really-
should be able to, but
I
I
really
can't.
recommend that when you roll up evenly, like pressure, like Cecile said, if you roll it unevenly, like tilted or something, it can cause creases, damage, really. And also, if you have surface dirt, you roll it up, that's another problem. So we have Cecile here. She brushes if there's something fallen, and she rolls real just right. That rolling takes some skill to experience to roll it up. So Cecile is our expert.
I learned from Hou-mei.
Okay, Faye.
I was wondering if someone had some, they thought valuable Asian art that they wanted maybe to see if the art museum was interested in having in their collection. Do you guys weigh in on condition to say like no or yes?
Okay,
Yes.
so the question is, if an individual has artworks that they would like to see if the museum wants, does the conservation team ever weigh in
Yes.
on
Yes.
whether to accept it or not?
When I'm offered a gift, I have to check with Cecile. If I notice the condition is bad, I ask her to comment, and then we present it. Because Cecile may say, "Oh, this one unless you do major conservation, you cannot display." That would affect whether I accept or not.
Do you have any comments?
Because we don't have
So
funds.
you mentioned the Dunlap collection that had been
Right.
stored in the attic.
Right.
So you already had worked out with them to help you get money.
Right. I
so that
told
you were
them
able
we
to
cannot
accept it.
display them at all. And we even have to separate from all our precious scrolls because of the mold. Cecile have to isolate them, wrap them up. So everything, when we have gift, I do, if it's sensitive material, if it's like a bad condition, I have to check with both of them.
And I'll have to say that our curators are all very knowledgeable, and for the most part, they can identify the condition problems. But they also do run the objects by us before taking them to the director or the acquisitions committee.
Well, I do want to point out the soul jars that Kelly helped conserve on that one, because did I remember you said they came in pretty dirty?
Yes, yep.
So what all did you have to do? Because I love to tour the soul jars.
Yeah, they were very dirty. They had a lot of burial dirt on them. The worry with archaeological ceramics is that they get salts from the soil, and that can cause the glaze to flake off over time with changes in humidity. So we want to get all of the soil off so that it's no longer in contact with that, and then we need to monitor the humidity, make sure it's very controlled over time so that we don't get any chipping of the glaze over time. So it was a process of cleaning it off without using any type of solvents, because we can't get it wet because that will change the humidity and cause salts to crystallize and the glaze to chip off. So lots of dry cleaning, picking things out very gently, because that had a lot of cracks and crevices and carvings on it.
Tons of cracks and crevices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then now the case that it's in, we monitor the humidity in there, and we have silica gel in there that keeps it buffered from what else is going on in the museum.
Okay. Okay. I didn't realize those had been buried.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Well, a lot of questions.
Michael, we'll go with tongue. You can go later. Tongue.
About the horse, how big is it?
Okay, the question is, how big is our horse?
And does it have color?
It's difficult to say. There is polychrome there, but the surface has also been refinished, we know.
There's
And
color.
it's difficult to say what's original and what is
You
not.
know, the very famous town, 3 color of
Oh,
town.
yeah, that's the glaze. This one is not the glaze.
Oh.
Yes,
But
this is
it has
unglazed.
color.
And it's,
Yeah.
whatever this is,
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
It's a favorite of elementary school
Yeah,
kids.
about 2 feet.
About 2
Yeah.
feet
Wow,
tall.
that's big.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
in the gallery.
Yeah. Janet?
I had a question. I know that the museum now sends out notifications to members about like meet a curator if you've got artwork that you want looked at. Because a lot of these pieces are obviously bought by wealthy families, and then it looks like, at least for a good chunk of them, if they had been displayed at one point, they have not been displayed for decades and decades and decades, hence the mold and so forth and so on. So I guess what I'm curious about is, my thought is there are probably people out there right now who have valuable pieces in, I'll say in their collections, which may just be sitting in their attics or whatever. Is there a way to identify those people and not necessarily say, give me your collection now, but in a few decades down the road, when your family or your descendants may be interested in doing that, we want to work with you now so that we can help you maintain them in your home or display them in a way that preserves the quality, so that at some point either it stays in good condition for you, or if you are at that point ready to perhaps donate your collection, it has not deteriorated because of just improper care or storage.
So
Sort of a pre-active approach to sort of head off damage that can be completely avoided or substantially avoided if only somebody
She's
had
gonna
told them
repeat the
what to
question.
do or not
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah, so what Janet is referring to is Consult a Curator, which is available for members twice a year, usually in the spring and the fall, if I remember the schedule. Tomorrow afternoon, okay, yeah, I know you had to register for that. But I'll turn the rest of the question over to Hou-mei.
As far as I know, if it's a promised gift, donation, then we do give them. But even for general public, during the Consult a Curator Day, we have all our conservators there. So whenever anybody has a question about how to preserve this, how do I take care of this, I always send them to the 2 conservators so they can learn about how to keep it or to, what to do.
Did you ever say, this is lovely, but 20 years from now, remember us?
Whenever I see some painting, I do always say, don't expose too much light or something like don't put it right next to a light or sunlight.
The heating vent.
Yeah, we do give them that general information, but if they have specific question, I refer them. But so far, I don't have a huge collection that is we are working with right now, no.
Okay. Rob, did you have a question?
I have a question. Pardon me if this is just misguided conclusion others that I've seen, but it seems like for how much we have in the collection as far as painting, East Asian paintings go, we don't display it as much as other places do. Is that because of the conservation
That
thing?
That is a very good question. The problem is space.
Space.
Asian gallery, as you noticed, just have a long, narrow space. That's all I have. And there are windows on one side. The sunlight can shine in on the first gallery, that Buddhist gallery. So I cannot put any light-sensitive material there.
Okay.
And then in the second room, where you see the painting, that painting case earlier, because the recommendation of Cecile, we measure the light, sunlight, indirect sunlight, we have to move the case. This last year, we moved the case slightly.
So the one that
So the light wouldn't
The
shine
hanging
on
scroll.
it for the hanging scrolls. And the overall Asian art gallery has very limited space. So we have very little space to display paintings. And the paintings is light sensitive, so by nature it need to rotate. Her guideline is about 4 months to 6 months. You cannot display beyond that period, and then we have to rotate. So actually that is a major job. But since we have only one painting case there, we are so short on display paintings. So that's actually easier job for me, but it's unfortunate. I wish I could display more paintings, but right now it's a space problem.
Yeah. But Hou-mei did convince the gallery to do the long case in the gallery now. So there's a beautiful set of album.
Hand scroll case, yeah.
Yeah, hand scroll case.
Could there be another one added there?
Well, as you can see, we have to walk on both sides. We have to consider wheelchair too. So for all these reasons, unless the director give me a new space, it's kind of difficult.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
I just had a question about the horse. I know you said after the analysis that 3 of the tassels, including the one on the forehead, were not of that original type material. And so the forehead tassel was removed. What about the other 2?
Okay, so the question is that it was brought up, it was okay? It was picked up. Okay, you were picked up. Okay.
Yeah, they're still on the horse right now, and that is due to the time frame that we have. By the time this was months and months of testing and working together to get all of this information. We didn't have enough time to address everything, and to get it ready and presentable for the show, the context of that treatment was just removing that questionable forehead one that is not seen in any other examples.
That forehead one is absolutely wrong. As soon as I see that, I know something's wrong with that horse.
Yeah.
All the other town horse, same style, never have a tassel on the forehead, like a unicorn, almost like a unicorn.
Yeah.
It's not the custom in the Tang Dynasty. So that's the first alarm I went to.
You're lucky they didn't paint it with rainbows.
Yeah.
Is there a plan to eventually, perhaps with the next conservation treatment, remove the other 2 that don't?
Yeah, that's a question, or that could definitely
Yeah, that
happen.
could be a
I mean,
possibility.
it's very likely that none of them are
Yes.
part of that horse.
That's right.
They do all look a little weird.
Yeah, and none of them are the material of the horse.
Yeah.
So even though some are ceramic, they haven't been fired to the same temperature. They're not the same. If those, they would have all been in the same kiln, right? So they would have been at the same temperature. Yeah, so it's something that could be done, but it, again, my schedule is very
Right.
driven by exhibitions. So
Right.
if it was going to go on in some type of representation of the horse, then it would come into the lab again for that as part of my schedule. Yeah.
Maybe,
yeah.
maybe we will have another show.
But the other tassels, not all of them are attached with the animal glue. Some of them have much more fill material, and the resin is much more difficult to get off. So removing all of them is going to be much more invasive to the sculpture. So that's another thing to consider when thinking about taking them off is what are we going to find underneath? is this going to cause damage to do it? How invasive is it going to be? Is that risk worth the gain? So those are all things that we have to weigh.
Truthfully, when I tour it, most people don't notice the tassels. It's the head of the horse and that proud stance that it is. And you'll go by with kids that are actually going like this, trying to, dance like the horse. So, hey, it gets them really involved with that. It's just like you see the Buddhist paintings and have them do the hand gestures. So let's go with Nagas, Janet.
So it's a question for Hou-mei. So quite a few of the Japanese paintings that you showed were Tosa school. Is Cincinnati one of the few places in the U.S. with a lot of Tosa school paintings, or?
No.
Okay, I have to repeat the question. So the question was about the Tosa school paintings, and does Cincinnati have a particular big number of them?
Not really. We are not very strong in Tosa painting, not in volume. We have a few, but we have the screen you saw is a very interesting painting because it's the Tosa school used to dominate in the Shogun court, and then actually this screen is so important because the marriage, Chiyo Mizuhisa is the female artist. Her father is Tosa school founder, and her father was dominating in the court. And when her father passed away, the husband took over the family affair and replaced the father in the court. So Kano school started to dominate in the court. So this change generated by this family. So I think it's so interesting, this marriage, her marriage with a Kano school leading master and her father, the transition took place because of her marriage. So that's another interesting
Her husband was
thing.
a Nobunaga, right? Her husband
Was a Tosa school.
but no,
His name.
family
He was Kano school.
No, his family name, he was a Nobunaga.
Yeah, but he is Tosa represent.
Right. The family wasn't the Nobunaga in terms of Japanese
Family names?
family, political. Wasn't that one of the lead families at a certain period?
No.
He
was a short-lived of the three unifiers.
No.
No, Nagas?
That's Nobunaga.
Hisa.
Are we?
Oh,
Well, they work for the shogun. They are painters. They are not
Right,
part
but
of.
I'm just, I'm not thinking of painting at all, I'm just thinking of Japanese families
History.
who sort of ruled the sort of political situation at certain.
when she was alive, it was a mess.
Yeah.
No, really.
Yeah.
No, it was when she was alive. It was the end of the Warring States period, and then you get the three unifiers that came through until Ieyasu Tokugawa did the final unification. So, some of them were prominent, but not like when the Tokugawa took over.
That wasn't my question, though.
Okay. Well, what's your question? Well, we'll knock that out of the video. Okay.
Mike has a question.
What was your question?
The actual question was, thinking about something like the horse, and you talk about provenance, is there ever a situation where the decoration or something has been added which is not typical, but the addition itself is somehow important because of who did it
No.
or why it was done? So the fact that, yes, it's not original, but you don't want to remove that because that in itself is
Part of the history.
part of
Yeah.
an important
That's
part of
true.
the history.
Okay, so I have to repeat that question.
Yeah.
And the question is that, is there ever a time when something that has been added to an artwork might be important in the history of art or the history of that particular piece?
Yeah, and that's why I'm also so weary to remove any more of the tassels, because it's possible that there's something that I don't know that's not obvious to me. And unfortunately, I don't have records of what anyone who treated it before me, except for Megan in 2007, what anyone else was thinking or what they saw.
Right.
and what led them to those decisions.
Yeah.
So it could be that something's added to add more value to a piece before it's sold, which happens a lot with archaeological
Right.
objects. We see that a lot. But there's times when something might have been added for a real reason. Maybe there was evidence that it was there before.
Yeah.
There are things in treatments where old ceramics used to be repaired with staples.
Wow.
And you see these staples in the ceramics, and they're just hideous. But that's a type of treatment that would have been done so that someone could continue to use that piece or display it. It would still have value for them. And it's a really iconic type of treatment that was done for ceramics before glues and adhesives existed.
Yeah.
So
help
we
you with
keep
dating.
a lot of those treatments.
With the Japanese who broke in and they'll put the gold.
Yes.
Oh, kintsugi.
Yes.
Kintsugi.